Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Nicholas Woolsey Photography Video Tutorials. I still haven't figured out a name for this whole thing, but welcome back anyways. I'm happy to have you here. My name is Nicholas Woolsey, and today I'm going to talk to you about the exposure triangle. I talk to a lot of beginner photographers that I work with and mentor, and this seems to be a common misunderstanding or problem, and so I want to address what the exposure triangle is, what it is not, how to use it for your photography. It's basically the foundation of taking a picture. So we'll get into that right after this intro. Okay, cool, we're back. If you're new to the channel, my name is Nicholas Woolsey. I am a full-time wedding and portrait photographer. I've been shooting for 10 years total, 7 years professionally, 3 years self-employed, 100%, supporting my family of 5 off of my photography. So it is a good time. I really enjoy my life. I love this. I get to work from this desk here in my home from this computer and make a living at it. It's awesome. If you're new to the channel, why don't you just scroll down just a touch and hit that subscribe button. And then after this video, if you like it, you can give that thumbs up. And then also at the end, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in that comment section. I get back to everybody that comments. And so if you have a video you would like to see or something you have trouble with, let me know and I will be sure to help you. All right, so let's jump in today. We're talking about the exposure triangle. What is it? It is basically the foundational building block of your photo. Within the exposure triangle, we have 3 steps here. We've got the first step of your aperture. We've got the second step of your shutter speed, and we have the third step of your ISO. These make a nice little triangle. All right, so how do we use these? I'm glad you asked. First off, when I go into a scene, I look at it and I survey everything and I say, what does it look like today? Is it bright? Is it dark? Is it dimly lit? Is it brightly lit? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? From there, I adjust my ISO. That's the first thing I do. I use it as sort of the foundation of the whole operation. So if it's a sunny day and the sun is bright in your face, it's burning your eyes, you're gonna wanna go with a 100 ISO or a 50. Okay, and let's say it's cloudy outside, but the couple you're shooting or the family that you're shooting, they really want their pictures taken today. That's fine. You might want to bump up your ISO to about 400, 500. What if you're in a school auditorium and the lights are dim and your kid is on stage and it's not very well lit and you don't want to use a flash or you can't use a flash? No problem. Just bump that sucker up to 4,000 or 5,000. You're good. All right, so these are all sort of subjective to the other 2 pieces of our pyramid, right? The aperture and the shutter speed. So your aperture or your f-stop is a number normally between 1.4 and 22. That's how you're going to know that you're dealing with aperture. And so I have this little lens right here. This is a 1.4 lens, which means that the widest this lens can open up on the aperture ring inside the lens is 1.4. That is very, very wide. Okay? The most narrow that hole will open up in the aperture ring is a 16. That's pretty small. It's not as small as some lenses go, but it is pretty freaking small. So I'm going to zoom in right here, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. This is the focus ring, okay? And then right behind that, right here, this is your aperture. And so you'll see, because this is a manually operated aperture ring, I'm manually operating this, hence the name, to go from a 16 to a 1.4. And you might be saying, Nick, that's really confusing. You're saying that the smallest number equals the biggest opening, and the biggest number equals the smallest opening. That's correct. It is confusing, but you just got to get used to it because that's the way it was designed. I don't know why, I don't know who came up with this, but that's the way it is, okay? That's our aperture. Now let's move forward to shutter speed. What is shutter speed? Shutter speed is simply how fast or slow your shutter opens to take a picture, okay? A slow shutter speed might be 1/4 of a second or 2 seconds or 10 seconds. A fast shutter speed might be 1/2000th or 1/4000th or 1/8000th of a second. These are all examples of shutter speed. How does the shutter speed work in conjunction with the other 2 pieces of our pyramid? Easy. So once you have your ISO set, which is simply your camera sensor's sensitivity to light, 100 being not very sensitive, 6,000 or 12,000 being extremely sensitive to light. And then you have your aperture set at 1.4 or 1.8 to allow a lot of light in, or f22 to let very little light in. Then you can adjust your shutter speed accordingly. Now, it's worthy to note right here that depending on what type of shooting you're doing, you're going to want to lean more heavily on one of the three options. For instance, if you're doing landscape, you want everything in the entire frame in focus so that you can get a beautiful picture of the entire frame, all the way from the horizon to the flower that you might be shooting right in front of you. So for this, here's where your aperture comes into play. You want a very deep depth of field. Where does the deep depth of field come from? A very tiny hole. The smaller the hole inside your lens, the more that will be in focus whenever you take your photo. The larger the hole on your aperture ring, the less that will be in focus when you take a picture. So if you see professional photographers take pictures and there's very, very little in focus, just a sliver on a certain plane within the image that's in focus and the rest is all thrown out of focus, that's a very shallow depth of field. That is taken with a 1.4, a 1.8, 2.8, whereas a landscape photo is taken with a very deep depth of field at f16 or f22 or something crazy like that. I personally don't take a lot of landscape photos because I'm a wedding photographer, and so I go for more shallow depth of field photos. So let's lean more heavily on the shutter speed side of things, okay? Let's say you're shooting an event and there are bicyclists racing past you. You're at a bicycle race. You want to catch the blur of motion as the cyclist pedals past you. You want to get everything out of focus except for him, but you want to see like a trail of motion. All you would do with that is you would lean heavily on your shutter speed. Lower your shutter speed to 1/50th or 1/30th of a second, and then adjust the other two pieces of your pyramid according to that. So you might do 1/30th of a second at f6 at 600 ISO, depending on the scene, how bright, how dark it is outside. And that way, whenever you take your picture, you're moving with it, you're panning with it. It's worthy to note here that anytime you shoot on less than 1/60th of a second with your camera, you are normally going to want to use a tripod. This is good for the panning motion, so you can pan with, or if you need to take a photo at less than 1/60th of a second and you want a crisp frame, you have to have that tripod. Anything faster than 1/60th of a second, you're good. You can handhold, no problem, no big deal. For those of you that have watched my videos before, you may have noticed up in kind of the side of this frame that I have a black square on my wall. Those of you that are new, it's all new to you. But those of you that have been here before, you'll see kind of that black frame. I recently put a blackboard block on my wall, and so we're going to jump over to that now, and I'm going to explain a little bit more with the exposure triangle. Let's go. All right, guys, we're over here at the blackboard now, and I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of a visual what I mean when I talk about the exposure triangle. Here it is, exposure triangle. You see we have a triangle. I mentioned before that I use my ISO as kind of the foundation of my triangle, and I base everything off of that because I'm more interested in the scene that I am in. So I put down here the ISO. That's kind of my foundation, and then I adjust the other two pieces of the triangle to fit that foundation. So when it comes to ISO, like I said, the lower the number, like 100, the less sensitive your camera is going to be to light. So you can shoot in bright daylight at a 100 and your sensor will pick up less light than, say, if you were shooting at 5,000 outside during a bright daylight. I promise you this, if you shoot at an ISO 5,000 in bright daylight with moderate settings of your other two, you will have a white picture. It will just be blown out totally. All right, so I start off with the ISO. That's my foundation. That's the way I shoot. The next thing I take into consideration is being a wedding and portrait photographer, I want a very shallow depth of field. It goes for that sort of professional look that a lot of people mention. And so that is what I have found sells for me when it comes to booking clients, as they look at my pictures and they love the professional look, that shallow depth of field. And I'll show a couple photos right here of some of that work that is very shallow depth of field. So when it comes to aperture, which is also known as your f-stop, it has a range from about 1.4, 1.8, up to 2.8, 3.5, 5.6, f16, f22. And so if anyone ever says, what f-stop are you at? That's what they mean, what aperture. Or if they say, what aperture are you at? They're talking about your f-stop. I don't know why there's two names for it. That's just the way it came about. It's weird. Not everything in photography makes sense, and a lot of stuff is backwards. So that's what people are talking about when they're speaking about aperture or f-stop. Okay, the last piece of our triangle is shutter speed. Your shutter speed comes in numerous increments. Anything from 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 1 second, a 20th of a second, a 50th of a second, which you might think would be really fast. It's like 2 split seconds, but honestly, it's very slow when it comes to shutter speeds. 1/4000th of a second. If you took 1 second and split it into 4,000 increments, one of those. That's how fast your shutter speed is opening and closing. 1/4000th of a second. This is great if you're looking to capture water droplets falling in midair, crystallized like in midair from a water fountain. That's where you want to be. This is where you want to be, 1/50th of a second, if you are looking at a flowing creek and you want to capture the motion and the fluidity of the water. That's where you want to be. So overall, I hope this gives some understanding to you as far as what the exposure triangle is and how to use this for taking photos. Simply, for me, and what I recommend for you is, what's your scene? Start with your ISO. Do you need your camera sensor to be very sensitive to light or just a little bit sensitive to light? Then go with your aperture. Do you want to capture the whole frame in crystal clarity, or do you want the real shallow depth of field with a lot of bokeh and a lot of out of focusness around, right? And then just adjust your shutter speed going from there. Now, this is not a comprehensive lesson on the exposure triangle. There are many different factors and you can kind of sway this. Just like there's not one triangle. There's acute, there's obtuse, that's all the only two I know. Okay, but just like that, you can shift a triangle many different ways, right? But if you do it correctly, you'll always end up with a certain number for your triangle, right? What is that number? 180 degrees. If you didn't know that, there's a math lesson. Any triangle that all 3 corners touch, they always equal 180 degree points, okay? So for a perfect triangle, you're gonna have 60, 60, and 60. Don't ask me how I know that. I wasn't very good in school, but I do know that a triangle always equals 180 degrees. And if it doesn't, if you know more than me, just leave a comment down below. All right. One last thing I have to show you guys is this really awesome piece of tech that I use, and I thought I would throw in a little piece of tech at the end of my videos. So if you want to see that, stick around. I'm going to jump back to my desk and I'll see you in just a sec. Okay guys, I wanted to show you this piece of tech that I recently got, and this is called the Zhiyun Smooth-Q gimbal. This thing is pretty awesome. So it's a 3-axis gimbal that is battery operated, and it gives flawless smooth video through your cell phone, smartphone, what have you. You can use GoPros on this. There's a little adapter you have to buy, and this thing is pretty awesome. So let me just show you really quickly how it works. You hold down the button for 2.5 seconds or so, and it turns on. You move this thing, and it moves simply. But the cool thing is, you can move all around, and it follows you, right? This thing is awesome. It's got an app that you can use that you can control the phone. It's got different modes. Let's say I'm looking at my computer here. I can pan side to side, but it won't go up or down, okay? You press that mode button one time, now it's locked on that screen. I can turn this way, I can do anything I want, but it's gonna stay locked in that one position. Rad. You press twice, and now it pans any motion, any way you want. Up, down, side, whatever. Cool. You triple click quickly. Boom. Selfie mode. Take a video of yourself, whatever you want. Awesome. Triple click to go back. Boom, you're back taking videos. It's literally one of the coolest pieces of gear that I have. I've made some of my YouTube videos with this. I take family pictures with this. I can set it up. You can do a motion time lapse with this. So in the next 30 seconds or so, I'm gonna show you some video footage that I got at the beach last night with my family. It was really cold, really windy, and we got some pretty awesome footage. So check that out. And if you wanna get one of these for yourself or for a loved one, I'll put a link below where you can buy it.
Thanks for noticing. Now we're starting to get this!
Honestly, it's a steal at 130 bucks versus the DJI gimbal. If you're familiar with DJI, they make the drones and that sort of thing. They have a gimbal, it's $400 or $500, the same exact thing. Let me just give you a couple tech specs on this. This has a battery that takes 3 hours to charge. It runs on for 12 hours, which is amazing. And then a couple other cool features is down here at the bottom, there's a USB output, so you can charge your phone from this battery in here. So not only do you get an awesome gimbal, but you also get a phone charger that will charge your phone 2 to 3 times. rad. You can put it in landscape or portrait mode. So you simply unscrew this button on the back, push it out, turn your phone, screw the button back down. I call it a button, but it's a knob. Center your phone on there, turn it on, and you're back photographing or videoing in portrait mode. Pretty awesome. It fits anything up to 6 inches diagonally measured. So I think this is a 5.3 or a 5.6 or something. And so it fits perfect in here. So if you have a 6-inch diagonal screen, then it works for you. If you have a bigger phone than that, then you're not using a phone, you're using a tablet. Okay, so that's enough of that. If you want to check this product out, it's linked below. Also below, you'll find links to all of my various social media networks. I would love to connect with you. If you want to connect, they're down there. And then once again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. I really enjoy teaching this stuff and giving free content and free value. So hit that subscribe button and tick that little bell, and that way you'll get a notification when I post throughout the week. Thanks for coming along. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.